So our office applied for a grant through a 319 program, which came from the Ohio EPA, which ultimately comes from US EPA, but that was back in 2015, 2016 was the start of the preparing for the grant and then doing it. We had worked multiple years with this grant, and at the end there was a few funds left, and we had wanted to put a wetland in somewhere, and by happened a chance that I was talking to Jeff about, we should install a wetland in this watershed, and Jeff.
I had mentioned to you that we had the Kalida Fish and Game Club holds an extravaganza yearly, and they always had sheet flow coming through their parking lot, dumping into Deer Creek, which was draining about a 17-acre watershed up above. We knew we had water quality issues in Deer Creek, and the Kalida Fish and Game Club was having problems when they would hold their extravaganza, getting their cars stuck, because in the springtime when they hold their event, it was usually wet, and we usually had a heavy rain event come through there, and it created issues for them. So our thought came together was if we could get maybe the Kalida Fish and Game Club to donate this portion of the property to put a wetland in, we could fix their problem. We could also fix our problem with water quality. It would provide a win-win for education, and wetlands are required for, they protect almost a third of our endangered species, plants and animals. So it'd be a win-win for wildlife as well. So Kurt and I thought, well, let's present it to the trustees, and we went and presented it to the Fish and Game trustees. Basically, their in-kind match would be the property. We would provide the funding. We were also very lucky too. Bill Girding with Girding Ditching is one of the trustee members, and Bill chimed in and said, hey, I can help provide construction costs. So there was a tremendous savings there. It was kind of a project that everybody kind of collaborated on, and it turned out to be a fantastic project here. So a little bit about wetlands and why we install wetlands. Wetlands collect flow, and we try to target where we put wetlands so that we can collect this flow that's coming off of a watershed that's ultimately running into a ditch or a stream or a river. And we're just trying to keep those nutrients from reaching the stream. If we move them around and put them into a wetland, they can settle out. The plants can uptake the nutrients. The wetlands typically act more like a kidney. They're, beneficial. They clean the water up, and then either the water evaporates out of the wetland and the nutrients are taken up by the plants, or in time, if we get heavy flows, they'll emergency flow out of the wetland back into the stream, where we've taken a lot of the sediment and that out of the flow. And so it doesn't enter our streams and ultimately ends up into Lake Erie, which is what we're trying to protect. Right here in the western basin of Lake Erie, this was traditionally the Black Swamp, 120-mile long stretch, 40 miles wide, impenetrable swamp, one of the last areas that were actually colonized in the state of Ohio because of that swamp. Well, that swamp protected Lake Erie. There's only about 5% of that wetland left in the western basin of Lake Erie. So part of this is to bring some of these wetlands and reintroduce them back into what was originally the Black Swamp. The wetland that we put in at Kalida Fish and Game would sit on the very south edge of the Black Swamp.
So there's two different types of wetlands. You have the shallow excavation, where you just go in and excavate out spoil or dirt, and then create pools, or like in this situation at the Kalida Fish and Game, where we did some embankment, so we created a dike or a dike levee wetland. So there's two different types of wetlands.
This is a water control structure. This is one of two ways that we have to control water levels in the wetland here. This elevation of this water control structure is set at the same elevation as our emergency spillway is at the north end of the pond. So once the water reaches a certain level, which is maximum depth of 2.5 feet in this pond, it'll either flow over this weir in this water control structure and enter into Deer Creek, or it'll go out the emergency spillway and go around the edge of the levee there and back into Deer Creek. The water should have been treated here through the wetlands, so we should have less sedimentation and nutrients entering our tributary for Deer Creek.
Currently what we had going on was we had sheet flow that would come from the fields, come through, and it would sneak through here, right? So when they were talking about when they would have their extravaganza, the water would just pool up right in here once it comes through there from the field. So the idea was to capture that water going through there and then put it into a wetland. So during the construction, our first step was we went out and we did a core trench where the dike is going to be. And the idea of that is you're supposed to be looking and finding any tile, if there's any tile in there, to cut it off so we're not draining the wetland that we're going to have. So once we cut in our core trench, then we come back through and we pack down clay all the way through there. So once we pack that clay down in there, then that will help stop any water from going any further. So the next step, what they did was they started to cut a surface drain over here, and what they did with that spoil or the dirt, they brought that over here and started to make their dike. And then this surface drain, they made, that's what they made the dike for over here. So they took the spoil and dirt from the surface drain and started to create a diked levee to hold back the water. So now what you see out there is more of a surface drain that goes into this wetland. So this surface drain starts right up here where the water used to would flow from the field, and it collects it. Just hit the flood button. So when it rains, obviously you always have that water that it got rained on there, but we're collecting any water that came through from the fields into here, and it brings it down into this wetland. And then anything in the wetland, once it fills up with water, it will come out here and eventually go over. But a lot of it is collected in the wetland. So after we constructed it, and after about a year, we would come out after a rain, and there was a little bit of water in there, but not much, and so we just thought it was something, it just wasn't settling in right or something. So we came back in, and we where our tile is for the water control structure, we re-betonited both sides of that to make sure we didn't have any seepage coming around the pipe. So the first year we thought we had it fixed. We kept coming back out, and again, it was still staying in that same level of water. We weren't holding any water back. So we kept wondering what's going on. Eventually, what we found was there was a tile in the underneath the core trench of the wetland. So what was happening is we found a blowout right here that was seeping the water out through that tile and into the ditch. So we came back in and dug that tile out, packed that soil back in its place, and did away with that tile. So we weren't losing any water, and now we're starting to see the water come up, and we're holding back a lot more water than we ever have. So.
Almost within 6 months after the first spring, the wood ducks and different waterfowl, teal, and that started to use the wetland. And within about 6 months, we started to see water plantain and different floodplain vegetation start to come in that we typically see in wetlands. It was all brought in by the wading birds, such as your herons and your ducks. We didn't need to seed the wetland at all. It was all naturally seeded by wildlife.